Hey, my husband and I were sitting across the bar and we saw you sitting here alone. And we think you're really, really, really beautiful. And we just wanted to tell you that we love your vibe. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am so sorry. I will never forget the very first time I had a couple approach me like this. And honestly, I didn't even know that they were trying to have a threesome with me. I was in a relationship from 21 to 27, and I didn't know that people who were hanging out after 2 o'clock in the morning are either trying to do drugs or trying to get laid. And this couple invited me back to their place, and I quickly figured out that they were trying to do the do with me. Now, unfortunately, I am tragically heterosexual, so it wouldn't have gone that way, no matter how cute they were. And yes, they were very, very cute. It started happening to me a lot when I was living in Orange County, which is decidedly more conservative. And a lot of the people who would do this to me were very obviously conservatives, right? And with that being my experience, I was completely unsurprised to find out what was happening with the Florida GOP Republican chairman, Christian Ziegler, and his wife, Bridget Ziegler, one of the co-creators of Moms for Liberty. Christian Ziegler is a 40-year career politician who was recently elected the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. Having worked with the Republican Party of Florida since 2012, he's really close to the former governor of Florida, Rick Scott, and the current governor and presidential candidate, Ron DeSantis. The fight for the role of the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida was described as a proxy battle between presidential candidates, Ziegler being more of a Trump Republican and Evan Powers, who he was up against, being more of a Ron DeSantis Republican. And this February, he very narrowly won this election. Along with his wife, Bridget, the Zieglers are a Republican power couple taking Florida by storm. Now, Bridget Ziegler is a former Gucci sales associate turned school board terrorist. And she's one of the main architects behind the Parental Rights in Education bill, also known as the Don't Say Gay bill. At the suggestion of her husband, Bridget Ziegler would join the Sarasota County School Board in 2014. Christian would use his connections with Rick Scott, and a few months later, she was formally elected to a position. Now, I called her a school board terrorist because soon after she joined the school board, she became known for her dramatic and disruptive outbursts during school board meetings. At the time, she was one of the only conservatives on the school board, and she would quite routinely get outvoted by the more liberal people on the school board. And so, naturally, she formed her own rival group called the Florida Coalition of School Boards, which provided education and information to Florida-based conservative school board members. But in 2022, her wish would finally come true, and conservatives would have a 4-1 majority on the school board. In 2021, Bridget Ziegler, along with several other conservative women on school boards, would start Moms for Liberty, a conservative group consisting mostly of women who are fighting for, in their words, parental rights at all levels of the government.
If you see this acceptable, you belong on a national registry and not a school board.
I'm sure everybody at this point has heard about Moms for Liberty. They are behind a lot of the book banning that's going on right now, and they rally against the woke agenda. Things like CRT, to which they mean, Black History Month and any conversations about race, and things like gender ideology, to which they mean transgender people existing in public, especially at schools. A few months ago, I did a review of a book called It's Perfectly Normal. It is a sex education book that conservatives have been rallying against. It's one of the many books that has been banned from schools and libraries. Here's a clip of Bridget Ziegler talking about It's Perfectly Normal, so you can get an impression of how she feels.
What's actually in some of the school curriculum and in the school libraries for kids that is objectionable?
So I usually have them right next to me, and I'm sorry I don't, because I could flip to the pages, because we're at the point where if you think back a couple of years ago, being called a racist was like the worst thing, but now it's overused. But it really shut down the conversation. Then it was bigot, transphobic, all those. Book banner is now that new buzzword, if that makes sense. As much as I don't want to give the publishers more money, maybe, but go buy Genderqueer. Go buy a book called Choked that we just recently found. Go buy Farm Boy. I mean, go buy This Book is Gay. Go buy It's Perfectly Normal. And that's a book for 4 to 8-year-olds that talks about very detailed, explicit penetration details for a 4 and 8-year-old.
If you want to see my full thoughts about It's Perfectly Normal, you can check out the video that I made about the book. But just as a summary of how I felt like the book had a lot of very important information in it that would help a lot of kids from being hurt. And sometimes when people rally against sexual education, my little alarm bells go off, because sometimes I know what actual groomers are looking for is ignorance around sex, right? So sex education for a lot of people is the thing that allows them to understand that certain things are not okay. And there are some people who have read It's Perfectly Normal and realized that an adult was harming them. And so for that reason, I think it's a very important book. And if you want to know my full thoughts about it, go check out that entire video. But anyway, Moms for Liberty is a 501c4 organization, which means that they are allowed to participate in politics as long as it is not their primary focus. It also means that they don't have to disclose their donors.
Its founders also quick to balk at any mention the group is GOP funded or politically motivated at all.
We are an issue-based organization. Our number one goal is to help parents to speak up for their parental rights. And if there's an elected official that wants to get behind that, all the better.
In addition, they rally against the public education system and often push for more privatized Christian-based education. And some people argue that Moms for Liberty's biggest goal is, in fact, destroying public education through all of the things that they're doing and leaving only Christian-based private education in that wake. In fact, Bridget Ziegler would attempt to present a company called Vermillion Education as a potential consultant for the Sarasota School Board. She presented Vermillion Education as a helpful tool in implementing more conservative policies. This includes things like which textbooks to purchase and which books to add or remove from the library. Now, at the time, Vermillion Education was only a 3-month-old company, and the company had ties to Hillsdale College. Now, I'm sure you're asking, what is Hillsdale College? Well, Hillsdale College is a conservative college known for teaching conservative activists how to organize and advocate for more conservative policies. And they also promote a more conservative view of history. It's worth noting that Hillsdale College has very publicly funded charter schools.
Turns out the 3-month-old company, which vaguely describes services ranging from guidance and communication to audits, was founded in Hillsdale, Michigan. Its resident agent, Jordan Adams, a former civic education specialist at Hillsdale College, the same conservative Christian college the DeSantis administration wants to recreate at Sarasota's new college. But it has also widely been criticized for pushing biased and politically driven curriculum. In fact, Adams' resume includes helping Hillsdale open publicly funded classical education charter schools, including some in Florida, and creating Hillsdale's controversial 1776 curriculum. Last year, we discovered Adams was also paid by Florida to review math textbooks for prohibited topics, including critical race theory.
Vermillion Education's founder is a man named Jordan Adams. Adams is a so-called civic education specialist who essentially audits textbooks for woke content.
We have one chance at this, right? It took almost 100 years for us to start playing the game, and they have a 100-year head start. If we don't make the most of this chance, we're not going to get another one. I mean, it very much is within education, it's a do or die kind of moment.
That was leaked audio of Jordan Adams, president of Vermillion Education Consulting Company, addressing a Moms for Liberty summit in Philadelphia. Adams, an education consultant with no education degrees and a graduate of Hillsdale College, also described his consulting work as the fox in the henhouse.
Bridget Ziegler wasn't really able to explain how she heard about Vermillion Education. Just simply that she thought that they would be helpful in removing distractions like CRT, and of course, they don't actually mean critical race theory in the truest sense. They really just mean like literally Black History Month and truthful retellings of American history. One of Bridget Ziegler's biggest critics on the school board is a man named Tom Edwards. Edwards is an openly gay man, and he argued that Vermillion education would be bad for students.
To bring this into Sarasota County schools at this time, I think is a huge mistake.
Tom Edwards is the board's only Democrat and was recently targeted by the governor and Florida's GOP as a liberal school board member to defeat in the next election. Edwards sees Vermillion's Hillsdale ties as a way to further divide a school board already at odds.
Frankly, I was waiting for something like this. Can you imagine? I sit next to the wife of the chair of the Republican Party for the state of Florida.
Like I said, the Sarasota County School Board meetings have now become synonymous with these dramatic, disruptive outbursts.
2 weeks ago, it was this.
Mr. Edwards appears to be a lawbreaker and an LGBTQ groomer.
This week, it was this.
What Tom stands for and what Tom wants to do to our children in this school district isn't what a majority of what...
And Tom Edwards had had enough.
I'm not going to sit here and allow...
We're going to recess.
Wednesday morning, he filed paperwork to run for re-election.
I have absolutely no doubt that this is a fight that I will win.
He said the rhetoric is hurting students in the Sarasota school district who may be gay or lesbian.
They're accusing me of hurting children when in fact they're hurting children. Their ugly rhetoric is telling all children that their gay and lesbian friends are groomers and pedophiles.
A political fight that will be watched across the state is brewing, as Edwards had already been on a list of school board members targeted by the governor's political team over a so-called woke agenda. Board Chair Bridget Ziegler, who was a strong DeSantis ally, said Wednesday the rhetoric against Edwards was unacceptable, but did not think it was her place to formally stop it.
Calling people names that are intended to be offensive, like racist, bigot, groomer, etc., should be off the table.
She insisted his walkout was planned.
I know my colleague is absolutely utilizing it now for exploitation, and it's not genuine in any way, shape, or form.
Like I said, Bridget Ziegler was one of the main architects behind the Don't Say Gay bill. For those of you with short-term memory, the Don't Say Gay bill outlawed conversations about the LGBT community from the kindergarten up through the 3rd grade. And since it was passed, it's been expanded to go all the way up to the 12th grade. And I know that when it comes to the Don't Say Gay bill, there are some people who think, well, that makes sense, right? Kids shouldn't be talking about that. But I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that the language of the bill is intentionally vague. It's intentionally vague because it's essentially trying to criminalize all LGBT people having any sort of visibility in school, whether they are a student or a teacher. So naturally, a lot of people's feelings about Florida have shifted since this bill. I mean, I used to really, really want to go to Miami, but now I'm not interested at all in going to Florida because of the very bold, outright homophobia, transphobia, racism, etc. The Williams Institute did a survey that found that 40% of parents have considered leaving Florida because of the Don't Say Gay bill. And in response to that statistic, Christian Ziegler said, with that said, if a Democrat voter is passionate and perverted enough to support the sexualization of kids during school in grades as early as kindergarten, then I would agree that Florida is probably not the best fit for them. Together, the Zieglers have done immeasurable harm to both the LGBT and POC communities of Florida. And so, when charges were brought up against Christian Ziegler that seemed to suggest that Bridget Ziegler was in a sexual relationship with a woman, A lot of people were shocked by the blatant hypocrisy. Now, before we enter this particular section of the video, I do want to warn everybody that we will be discussing sexual violence. If you are uncomfortable with that, please skip forward. I have chapters on this video so you can see when this particular section is over and skip forward. We're going to be talking about this, and I will also say that it is alleged, right? Christian Ziegler at this point, when I'm filming this video, has not been charged officially. So it's all alleged right now, but there's a lot that seems to indicate that this did indeed happen. This October, a woman submitted a police report that suggested that Christian Ziegler had sexually assaulted her. The woman apparently had known Christian Ziegler for 20 years, and they had had a threesome a year before this incident happened that very clearly included the women interacting with each other. Christian had remained in contact with this woman over Instagram, where he used the vanish mode to discreetly connect with her. The three initially made the plan to meet up for the second threesome on October 2nd. Christian reached out to the unnamed woman on Instagram to verify that it was still going to happen and to get her address. However, the woman wasn't very responsive because she had a day off, she was drinking tequila, she was enjoying herself, and she wasn't being very responsive. When she did eventually get to her phone, she reached out to Christian to confirm a time, and Christian responded that he would be there at 2:12. Apparently, Bridget had been available at 1:30, but that window had passed and she was no longer available for the threesome. Christian was still interested in meeting up with this woman, but at 2:24, the victim responded, "Sorry, I was mostly in it for her." And just 5 minutes after she sent that text, Christian is pictured on a surveillance camera at her apartment complex. When she stepped outside to walk her dog, she found Christian standing there waiting for her in the hallway. He would enter her apartment and rape her without a condom and would leave a mere 30 minutes later. After the incident, the victim reached out to her sister and expressed to her sister that because she'd been drinking all day and because she very obviously was not sober, she didn't really feel as though she was capable of actually consenting. She had felt that she was very clear about not wanting to meet Christian for sex, especially because the wife was no longer involved. The victim also vented to several of her friends, and on October 4th, one of those friends called 911 to ask for a wellness check on the victim. Apparently, she had been drinking a lot, and the friend was aware of the fact that she had pain pills. And if you guys don't know, if you mix pain pills and alcohol, that can lead to death. As a result of the wellness check, she was taken to a hospital where a rape kit was done on her, and the police investigation officially began. Christian Ziegler is currently being investigated for sexual battery and is of course arguing that the incident was entirely consensual. After the incident happened, the victim actually contacted Christian to say that she did not like what happened. She wanted to make it very clear to him that what he did to her was not consensual. But Christian would continue to push against the idea that he actually hurt her, really reiterating that they've known each other for a very long time, that he doesn't want to lose her as a friend, and that he didn't mean to actually hurt her. He kept trying to smooth things over and call her on the phone and talk to her, but the victim did not want to speak to him. She just wanted him to know that he had hurt her. And she especially wanted him to know that she never wanted to do it ever again. Now, there's a lot of things that I could talk about when it comes to this particular incident, but I knew as I was going down the timeline that there were people who were going to hear the story and have a lot of criticism for the victim, do a lot of victim blaming towards the victim, especially for being a woman who has sex with women, who's engaged in a relationship with people who are cartoonishly anti-LGBT. Yes, even women who do have consensual sexual relationships with married men have boundaries that should be respected. The thing that I found interesting about this is that the Zieglers are staunchly anti-sex education, and something that a lot of people gain from sex education is a comprehensive understanding of consent. It's clear to me that Christian Ziegler assumed that because a year ago the two of them had sex, or they interacted in a sexual way, that a whole year later, she is open to doing it again. The victim laid out her parameters. She was only interested in having sex with him if she was there. No matter how silly you may personally find that or how much that may not make sense to you, that is what she defined as her boundary. And Christian negated it. Christian saw that text, knew that he wasn't coming over with Bridget, and decided to show up at her place anyway. I was kind of just in it for the wife is a clear indication that she's just not into you, dude. And as a side note, this particular aspect of this story made me giggle just a little bit because it is so common for the unicorns to really just be interested in the girl. You know, like a lot of bisexual women are attracted to like all women in like one really strange looking dude. And to really quickly define some terms, a unicorn is the mythical bisexual woman who is interested simultaneously in both the man and woman in a classic heterosexual coupling. And typically in these dynamics, the woman is the one who is bisexual. And the women who enter into these relationships with the husband and wife are referred to as unicorns because it is so unlikely that you will ever find a woman who's interested in both the man and the woman that it's as rare as a unicorn. Now, a lot of people are shocked by the fact that the Zieglers are engaging in these sort of unicorn hunting shenanigans while also being anti-gay. And I honestly feel like I might be one of the only people who wasn't surprised by that, just based purely on what I've seen within some of the communities that I've been tangential in. Now, we don't know if the Zieglers are swingers per se, but I've been tangential to the swing community since 2008. And I'll tell you that stuff like this is really, 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 really common, right? This sort of dynamic of a married couple trying to find a bisexual woman to join them for a threesome. That is what the vast majority of swingers events are sort of catering to and trying to enable, these bisexual explorations that are only really reserved for the women in the relationship. Most swing events that I've been to are very much a heterosexual affair where the men involved are straight and the women involved are bi. In fact, I'm often the weirdo because I am not attracted to women, and in these spaces, it's kind of a given that if you're a woman, you are attracted to women. And a lot of these spaces, honestly, are very, very, very homophobic. And what I mean when I say that is, while they're embracing women connecting with each other, they have like a really sharp rejection of two men interacting in that way. Like, it is so rare that I've been to a thing where men are even allowed to interact. It is usually very explicitly stated as something that is not allowed at the parties. And honestly, when you talk to some of these people, you get the impression that, you know, outside of these spaces, they aren't really interested in entertaining any LGBT identification for themselves. Now, of course, there are people in these spaces who are bisexual and do that thing, and they're not doing this weird toxic shit where they are homophobic outside but very accepting inside. But a lot of these swinger circles are very based in secrecy and not taking what's happening in here out there, right? And it's really not surprising to me that the Zieglers led a very publicly conservative life while having these private bisexual threesomes. That is so common. It's so common. And here's another layer of this as well. Oftentimes, the reason why it's not really seen as gay per se is that they're generally doing it in the context of their relationship. There's this idea of it's not gay if my husband's involved, right? A lot of times women interacting with each other in these spaces and in these dynamics is almost entirely for the pleasure of the man involved. Some men really get off on the idea of making their partners do things that they wouldn't typically do. For some men, it's kind of like a power flex, right? For them to be able to convince their straight partner to be with a woman for their pleasure. And so I wanted to present an alternative thought that I haven't really seen shared in this conversation. Bridget might not actually be interested in doing this. She might only be doing it because her husband fetishizes lesbian sex. And that is so common. I have been the shoulder for many a woman to cry on at a swinger event, and so common. Men are the ones pushing for this because so much of this is about pleasing men. For a lot of these couples, so much of this is about pleasing men. Men are almost always the ones who are pushing for these parties and these threesomes and bringing a woman into the mix. Like, that is almost entirely what it is. And you can almost piece it together in this situation because Bridget was like, I'm tired. I'm not going to go. It was 1:30, right? It was the middle of the afternoon, right? She said, I don't want to do it, right? And then Christian showed up as the only person who was available. And there's also quite commonly the, oh, me and my wife, oh, she got sick and can't show up. So they want to have a one-on-one. That's also common. A lot of times the threesome is really just a lead in to the husband having sex with another woman outside of his relationship. That is so often what it is. And sometimes these guys, when they get a whiff that their partners might be bisexual, they will see that as an opening for maybe potentially pursuing a sexual relationship with another woman. And it's a little bit easier to do that if it's presented as, here's this thing for both of us, right? As opposed to, here's this thing for me. I would like to go sleep with this woman that I've known for 20 years, right? Which I get the feeling might have been the case. It might have been the case that this woman who he's known for 20 years was really only interested in having sex with him if she was there because she was interested in her, right? When I first started seeing this story in my feed, there were a lot of people who were talking about Bridget being in a whole relationship with another woman. And I feel like it is important to point out that in these scenarios, very rarely do these people consider themselves polyamorous. They do not look at this unicorn as another partner. Christian Ziegler assaulting this woman does not surprise me because these couples often view the woman involved in this dynamic as a sex toy that can be easily and quickly discarded, especially if it means protecting their relationship. And it's clear that Christian felt entitled to her body. It's clear that Christian felt entitled to have sex with her because of conversations they've had in the past. It wouldn't shock me if he viewed her as a person who couldn't withdraw consent. I am unicorn hunter phobic because people like this suck. And it's not the idea of finding a person to join your relationship that is bad. It's the way that these people often treat the women involved, because it's usually women. It's not always, but it's usually women, right? And what really sucks is so often the unicorn is the person who is more openly out. We don't know who this woman is. We don't know if that's her case, but if she was, it would not shock me because that is so commonly the case. And for some people engaging in this particular type of stuff, it really doesn't matter what the unicorn wants. It matters what they want. And that is the attitude that I really, really do not like about a lot of unicorn hunters. Now, because I know people are going to make this comment, I am not arguing that conservatives are the only people who do this. Everybody across all political lines can fetishize lesbian sex and treat unicorns this way. I'm just saying what I know, and because I've lived in mostly conservative areas, I am very unsurprised by the conservative couple who is anti-gay in their daily life pursuing private bisexual threesomes, right? So I guess for me, it wasn't like this big, huge hypocritical moment because homophobia for so many people who have these relationship dynamics is a really big part of it. It's also not shocking to me that a lot of conservatives only envision queer relationships as sexual because that is the only time queer stuff enters their purview, right? Openly gay Sarasota County School Board member Tom Edwards had obviously a lot to say about this entire thing. And I just wanted to show you a clip of how he reacted to this news.
You were also in the meeting where Ms. Ziegler tried to get Vermillion hired to consult to the school board and implement what really amounts to a Christian nationalist agenda, a white Christian nationalist agenda. What is it that they're, in your view, trying to do? Because it seems that at least Mrs. Ziegler is in some way, somehow part of the LGBTQ community, or at least sometimes.
Well, what people do in the privacy of their own homes is not of my concern. What is my concern are the student achievement and closing the achievement gap in student outcomes. And what I found so horrifying about this process, from the origins of Moms for Liberty when I was first elected a school board member, right through the termination of a school board or a superintendent, and then into introducing Hillsdale College white Christian nationalism into public education. And now this, it's a constant distraction. And frankly, what is the most disturbing is the damage that the Zieglers, along with the Florida legislature, has caused for our LGBT plus students and the Black community. Whether it's we have to erase or whitewash Black history in order to make sure white students aren't uncomfortable, or to hear "Don't say gay" for all that time period while you're discovering your own identity.
The damage the Zieglers have done to Florida cannot be overstated. In a lot of situations like this, I am inclined to think, oh, they're just being ignorant, right? But it would be silly of me to act like these people are just naive and don't know what they're saying or just don't have the information. No, they are actively fighting to remove the things that would humanize LGBT people. That's kind of the purpose of a lot of the content that Moms for Liberty is trying to remove from schools. It's content that humanizes the diversity of us, right? It's content that acknowledges that not everybody is white, not everybody is straight. Like, that knowledge is what would usually help most people understand that maybe their perspectives about people who are different than them could be wrong, right? That maybe we all share commonality. But Bridget Ziegler looks at content that does that and says that it's grooming, right? So it would be silly for me to act like these people simply didn't have the education or were unaware. They are actively fighting to remove that education. It's deliberate. Something that I've really enjoyed about being part of the swing community and many other sort of alternative sex positive spaces is that they are spaces that for a certain type of person can really encourage honesty and transparency. I often say that if you can't be yourself at a sex party, where can you be yourself, right? Like, personally, I have gotten so much body positivity from being able to be in a space where I can socialize half naked, right? Like, it has been, for me at least, more than the sex part, right? Like, I don't even really participate in that part, if I'm being honest. It's like a social event for me. I know I'm weird. I go to the swinger club for the buffet and the conversation and the people watching. The people watching is really, really good. To me, it's kind of low-hanging fruit to acknowledge this, but yes, this does conflict with the front-facing image of the Republican Party, of family values. But from what I've seen, I don't imagine that there will ever be a future where, even in our conservative utopia, men are not fetishizing lesbian sex. And I guess knowing that, I really do wish that they would just get over themselves. Because I'm gonna be honest, the homophobia is what really often ruins this dynamic, right? The homophobia is often what fucks it up. Oftentimes, if the wife gets too close to the woman, it's, oh, you can't do that because of X, Y, Z, Z, Y, X, right? Like, even in these dynamics, there is always a thread of, you can't enjoy it too much because that's gay. When I see people like the Zieglers, I know that they are perfectly comfortable exerting political violence against people who are claiming the things that they are afraid of claiming out loud. And that's why we call it pride, by the way, because a lot of us have had those feelings of actively living in a way that contradicts what our actual desires are. And it took a while for us to get to a point where we say that we're proud of it and we're not going to hide it, right? I'm really glad that I've gotten to the point in my life where I can say that I'm a proud trans woman. And as somebody who grew up in a really conservative area, I really do understand the pressure to be closeted and to be hidden and to not actually be out about who you are. I really, really do. So if Bridget Ziegler is actually bisexual, it also doesn't surprise me that she, in her daily life, is engaging in anti-gay shit, because so frequently that is part of it, right? If you publicly deny that you're gay or that you're bi, or you say that other people are bad for doing that, it distracts from who you are. Both Bridget and Christian are denying that this happened, and I guess we're gonna have to wait to see how this all pans out, but it is not looking too hot for them. Prominent Florida Republicans, including Ron DeSantis, have called for their resignations. DeSantis saying, "When you have an investigation of crimes of this magnitude, I think the mission has to come first. This is not helpful to the mission, to have this hanging over his head. Most people acknowledge that it's just an untenable situation." Karen Rose, who has been Bridget's longest standing support on the school board, has also called for her resignation, saying, "I personally care about Bridget and her family and deeply regret the necessity for this course of action. But given the intense media scrutiny locally and nationally, her continued presence on the board would cause irreparably harmful distractions to our critical mission." At the time of me writing this video, the Sarasota County School Board has called for her resignation, and Bridget is refusing to relinquish her seat. Similarly, Christian Ziegler has also refused to leave his role as the chairman of the Florida GOP. I'm so curious to know what you guys have to say about this situation. How do you feel about some of my theories? Are you somebody who has had similar experiences? I am somebody who, once again, is very unicorn hunter phobic, and this was a subject for one of my podcast episodes, and I spoke about my feelings about it, and then I also had a call-in show with several people who have been unicorns talking about their experiences with things like this. So if you are interested in that, you can check that out on my podcast, True Tea with katblaque. I'll put a link in the description box below. And before I go, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members who have made making my videos possible. I don't do this enough, but I have a Patreon. It is the way that I create these videos. And I also really appreciate it as an outlet. My $10 Patreon members know that I use Patreon a lot to blog about my personal life and my various happenings and adventures. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go over to my Patreon to check it out. Anyways, I would love to know what you guys have to say about this, so please leave a comment in the comment box below. And as per usual, I want you to always remember and to never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Happy holidays.